The crystalline spires of the Galactic Federation's Deep Space Monitoring Station glowed with a soft bioluminescent pulse, marking the transition into night shift. Junior radar technician Clara sat at her workstation, her four eyes blinking in an alternating pattern that, among her species, indicated a mixture of boredom and contemplation. The holographic displays surrounding her workstation cast ever-shifting patterns of light across her iridescent scales, creating tiny rainbows that danced across her uniform. She absently twirled one of her sensory antennae around her finger, a habit that drove her supervisor crazy. Professional technicians maintain proper antenna posture, he'd remind her during evaluations. But at this hour, with only the quiet hum of the station's environmental systems for company, Clara allowed herself this small comfort. The memory of her grandmother's stories kept her company during these lonely shifts. Grand Matron Cetal had been different from the other elders in their colony pod. While most adults dismissed the human myths as cautionary tales for younglings, her grandmother treated them as precious mysteries waiting to be solved. They had a ritual, her grandmother would say, eyes gleaming with enthusiasm, called cooking. They would combine different chemical compounds purely for the pleasure of experiencing new taste sensations. Young Clara had been captivated by this idea. Her own people consumed nutritional paste calibrated to their exact dietary needs, efficient, healthy, and utterly boring. Clara's gaze drifted to the section of her display showing the Forbidden Zone, the region of space containing Sol, the humans' supposed home system. The name itself was melodramatic. Nothing actually prevented ships from entering that sector. Most species simply avoided it, believing it to be contaminated by whatever catastrophe had destroyed human civilization. She pulled up the standard reference file on humans, projected in crisp holographic detail above her station. The images were all artistic reconstructions, of course, since no actual recordings of humans existed in Federation databases. The figures looked both familiar and alien, bipedal like many species, but with only 2 eyes and the strangest arrangement of external features. Their skin appeared to have no scales or protective coating, and their sensory organs seemed impossibly primitive. Yet according to the fragments of information preserved in Federation archives, these seemingly vulnerable creatures had achieved faster-than-light travel independently, developed artificial intelligence without triggering a robot uprising, and reportedly created art so beautiful it could move other species to tears, all before allegedly destroying themselves in some cataclysmic event. Clara pulled up her personal research notes, carefully hidden within her private database. She had spent years collecting every scrap of information about humans she could find. Most of it was contradictory. They were either savage brutes or enlightened philosophers, technological geniuses or reckless expansionists, depending on which account you read. The station's environmental systems cycled through another cleaning phase, releasing a fresh burst of sanitizing spores that made Clara's scales tingle. She watched the decontamination procedure with mild interest, wondering what humans would make of such technology. According to the stories, they had been obsessed with cleanliness, but achieved it through the aggressive application of chemical agents rather than beneficial bacterial colonies. A message notification pulsed on her display, another gentle reminder from her podmates about the upcoming mate selection gathering. Clara dismissed it with a flick of her antenna. She was already considered eccentric for pursuing a technology career instead of the traditional diplomatic track favored by her species. Her fascination with human myths hardly helped her social standing. The radar systems continued their endless sweep of Federation space, each pane representing countless stars and potential worlds. Clara had memorized the standard energy signatures of every known spacefaring species, from the quantum bubble drives of the Federation's own ships to the psychic propulsion systems used by the enigmatic Drift Collective. She stretched, her scales shifting color slightly with the movement, another habit she needed to control better in professional settings. The night shift had barely begun, and the likelihood of anything unusual appearing on her screens was astronomically low. Still, Clara maintained her vigil, secretly hoping that somewhere in the vast darkness of space, There might be something more interesting than regulatory-compliant energy signatures and standard trading vessels. She had no way of knowing that in just a few minutes, everything she thought she knew about the galaxy was about to change. The radar chirped. At first, Clara almost missed it among the usual background noise of cosmic radiation and routine trader traffic. But something about this particular signal made her antennae vibrate with an instinctive response. She straightened in her chair, all four eyes focusing intently on the holographic display as her scales shifted to the deep blue of concentrated attention. The signal wasn't like anything she'd seen before. Federation ships produced distinct quantum bubble signatures, neat and orderly patterns that rippled through space-time like pebbles dropped in a still pond. The Drift Collective's vessels left psychic echoes that resembled aurora borealis. Even the mysterious nomad clans had recognizable warp signatures that looked like twisted knots in the fabric of space. But this was different. Clara's fingers danced across the holographic interface, adjusting sensor parameters and fine-tuning the detection arrays. The signal seemed to shift and change even as she studied it, as if the ship was somehow adapting to her scans in real time. She pulled up the complete database of known propulsion signatures, watching as the computer attempted to find a match. No results found. She tried again, this time including theoretical and experimental drive systems. The computer hummed, processing the request. Clara's scales flickered with yellow patches of excitement as she watched the analysis unfold. The closest match was to an obscure theory proposed by a Federation scientist 3 centuries ago, something about surfing the quantum foam between dimensions. The theory had been dismissed as impossible. The energy requirements alone would have been astronomical, and the computational power needed to navigate such spaces would exceed anything currently available to Federation technology. Yet there it was on her screen, a ship that seemed to be doing exactly that. Clara initiated a deep scan, her hearts beating faster as the data streamed in. The vessel's hull defied conventional analysis. It appeared to be composed of some sort of responsive metallic lattice that actively adapted to cosmic radiation and spatial stresses. Rather than deflecting or absorbing harmful radiation like standard shields, this material seemed to be learning from it. She double-checked her readings. Yes, the hull was actually incorporating the energy patterns it encountered, becoming more resilient with each passing moment. It was like watching evolution happen in real time, but with technology instead of biology. Or perhaps she realized with a start, it was both at once. The ship's size was difficult to determine, as its spatial dimensions seemed to fluctuate slightly, as if it wasn't fully committed to existing in just 3 dimensions. Its energy emissions were remarkably low for something capable of such advanced space travel, not because it was trying to hide, but because it was operating with an efficiency that bordered on perfection. Clara's claw hovered over the alert button. Protocol dictated that any unknown vessel should be reported immediately to Central Command. But something held her back. She thought of all the times her podmates had mocked her interest in human myths, of how her supervisor had suggested she focus on practical matters instead of chasing stories. If she reported this now, the ship would be gone before anyone could verify her findings. She'd be labeled as unreliable, possibly even delusional. Her career prospects, already complicated by her unconventional interests, would suffer even further. Besides, there was something about this ship that felt peaceful. It wasn't behaving like a threat or trying to hide. Instead, it moved through space with a grace that suggested confidence and purpose. Its technology spoke of a civilization that had transcended the need for defensive posturing. Making a decision that would later be marked as either brilliant or foolish, Clara began recording every scrap of data she could gather about the mysterious vessel. She created a secure private database, triple encrypted with her personal codes, and started documenting everything. The ship's energy patterns, its technological characteristics, its movement through space. As she worked, her antennae picked up something else, a faint harmonic resonance emanating from the vessel. It took her several minutes to realize she was unconsciously swaying to its rhythm. The ship wasn't just traveling through space, it was singing to it. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a wild, impossible thought began to take shape. What if all the stories were wrong? What if humans hadn't destroyed themselves after all? Over the next 3 cycles, Calera's personal database grew exponentially. Her quarters had transformed into an analyst's dream, with holographic star charts coating every available surface. She'd traded 4 weeks of premium meal credits for extra processing power, subsisting on basic nutrient paste while her computers churned through the mounting data. It started with a pattern so subtle she almost missed it. The mysterious ships, she'd tracked 7 distinct vessels now, never appeared in the same sector twice. At first, this seemed random, but after plotting their movements across a 3-dimensional star chart, Calara noticed something extraordinary. Their paths formed an intricate geometric pattern, like a crystalline structure growing through space. She sat cross-legged on her sleeping platform, all 4 eyes fixed on the holographic display, while her antennae twitched in concentration. The ships weren't just mapping space, they were building upon each other's data. Each vessel's path complemented the others, filling in gaps in their collective knowledge with mathematical precision. "Computer, overlay Federation trade routes," she commanded. The hologram shifted, adding familiar shipping lanes and soft blue lines. Calara's scales rippled with excitement as she saw how the unknown ship's paths wove between these routes, maintaining perfect observation distance while never crossing into high-traffic areas. They were studying the Federation, but not like spies or scouts. Their methodology was different. When Calara analyzed their scan patterns, she found they focused heavily on ecological data. Atmospheric compositions, biodiversity readings, energy usage patterns. They seemed particularly interested in worlds where technology and nature existed in harmony. She began categorizing their scanning technologies, which proved to be a challenge in itself. The ships employed what seemed to be organic sensors, living instruments that adapted and evolved to each new situation. Their observation methods were incredibly efficient, gathering massive amounts of data while leaving virtually no trace of their presence. Calara created a simulation of their sensor evolution, watching in fascination as the technology learned and grew. It reminded her of the flowering crystal gardens her grandmother used to cultivate, each scan blooming into new patterns of understanding, building upon previous knowledge in beautiful fractal-like progressions. During her regular shifts, she maintained her professional demeanor, filing standard reports and responding to routine traffic. But in her off hours, she was building something unprecedented, a complete analysis of an unknown civilization's exploration strategy. She noted how they handled different situations, their course corrections around solar storms, their careful distance adjustments near populated areas, their apparent interest in damaged ecosystems. The ships even seemed to communicate with each other, though not through any conventional means. Calara detected subtle quantum entanglement patterns between vessels, suggesting they shared information instantaneously across vast distances. The efficiency of their coordination was breathtaking. Then came the discovery that made her spill her nutrient paste all over her uniform. She had been analyzing their approach vectors, trying to determine their point of origin, when she noticed they all maintained a minimal safe distance from one specific sector, the forbidden zone containing Sol system. But they weren't avoiding it. They were orbiting it. Like electrons around an atomic nucleus, their complex paths all centered on that supposedly dead system. The mathematical precision of their movements suggested this wasn't just a patrol pattern. It was a dance, a celebration, a testament to something Calara couldn't quite grasp yet. She spent 3 sleepless cycles analyzing their behavior near Sol. The ships never entered the system directly, but they seemed to be gradually decreasing their perimeter, slowly spiraling closer as if preparing for something. Their sensor scans near the zone were different too, more thorough, more personal somehow, as if they were checking on something they deeply cared about. Calara's antennae trembled as she considered the implications. Everything she discovered pointed to a civilization far more advanced than the Federation, yet one that chose to observe rather than dominate. They possessed technology that could easily overwhelm any known defense, yet they moved through space like gentle gardeners tending to a vast cosmic ecosystem. As she stared at the holographic representation of their intricate dance through space, Clara realized she wasn't just observing an exploration pattern. She was witnessing something far more profound. This was the signature of a species that had transcended the usual motivations for space travel. They weren't conquering or claiming or even trading. They were nurturing the galaxy itself. The ancient record section of the station's library existed as a testament to bureaucratic neglect. Dust particles danced in the dim bioluminescent lighting, settling on rarely accessed data crystals and forgotten archival units. Clara's scales itched as she made her way through the narrow aisles, her antennae twitching at the musty smell of aging preservation gel. She called in 3 favors and traded her premium entertainment quota for access to this section. The elderly archivist, intrigued by her enthusiasm, had granted her entry during the quiet 3rd shift. "Nobody's asked to see these records in over 50 cycles," he'd mentioned, his own antennae curling with curiosity. Clara approached the terminal designated for historical probe data, her heart's beating faster as she inserted her authentication crystal. The ancient machine hummed to life, its holographic interface flickering with age. She began her search with the original probe records from the Sol System Survey. The first documents were exactly what she expected. The standard narrative everyone knew. Probe XJ479 had detected massive atmospheric changes and radiation spikes on Earth, leading to the conclusion that humanity had destroyed itself. But something about the data felt off. Clara's antennae vibrated with suspicion as she dug deeper. She pulled up the probe's raw sensor logs, not just the summarized reports everyone cited. The terminal groaned under the request, its processors struggling with a massive data dump. As the information materialized in front of her, Clara's scales shifted to the deep purple of intense concentration. The radiation patterns weren't what she'd expected. According to her recent research into weapons signatures, destructive events left characteristic isotope combinations. These readings were different, more ordered, almost purposeful. She cross-referenced them with the Federation's database of known energy patterns. No matches. Clara switched approaches, examining the atmospheric composition changes. The official report highlighted the dramatic shifts in carbon dioxide levels and the presence of unusual particles in the upper atmosphere. But looking at the raw data, she noticed something the original researchers had missed, or perhaps ignored. The changes weren't chaotic. They followed a precise mathematical progression. Her fingers flew across the interface as she plotted the atmospheric changes over time. The pattern that emerged made her gasp. It wasn't the signature of destruction at all. It was a controlled transformation. The radiation levels, the atmospheric alterations, even the unusual particles, they were all part of a massive, coordinated effort to change Earth's entire environmental system. Clara accessed the probe's visual data next. The images were grainy, degraded by time and radiation, but they showed something remarkable. The planet's cloud patterns had been altered into distinct geometric shapes, too regular to be natural. And in the night-side images, the light patterns on the surface didn't diminish over time as expected in a civilization's collapse. They changed, becoming more organized, more efficient. She found a forgotten appendix to the original report, filed by a junior researcher who'd been quickly reassigned to a remote station. The researcher had noted similarities between Earth's transformation and theoretical models for planetary-scale engineering. They'd suggested that rather than destroying themselves, humans might have undertaken something unprecedented, the controlled evolution of their entire world. The report had been buried, tagged as speculative and unsuitable for official consideration. The prevailing narrative of human self-destruction had been simpler, neater, and frankly more comfortable for the Federation's leading species. After all, who wanted to consider the possibility that a primitive species might have achieved something beyond the Federation's capabilities. Clara saved her findings to a secure crystal, her mind racing with implications. The mysterious ships she'd been tracking, with their living metal hulls and impossible technology, they didn't just resemble theoretical models for advanced human technology. They were the natural evolution of the same principles she'd just discovered in Earth's transformation. As she prepared to leave, her antennae caught a subtle movement in the shadows. She turned, expecting to see the ancient archivist, but found only dancing dust motes in the dim light. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't the only one interested in these long-forgotten records. The truth about humanity's disappearance was unraveling, and Clara was beginning to suspect it was the greatest discovery, or the greatest missed opportunity, in Federation history. The ship appeared at the edge of Clara's scanning range during the quietest part of third shift. Her antennae detected its presence before her instruments did, a subtle harmonic resonance that made her scales tingle with anticipation. This time, the vessel was closer than any of the others had ventured before. Clara's 4 eyes darted between her displays, confirming what her instincts already knew. The ship wasn't just passing through. It was deliberately maintaining position just outside standard Federation detection parameters, close enough to be seen by someone who knew exactly where to look, but far enough to avoid triggering automated alerts. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her scanning arrays. The ship's living metal hull gleamed in her enhanced visualization, its surface rippling like liquid starlight. As she watched, the vessel's structure shifted subtly, adapting to a passing solar wind with elegant precision. The standard first contact protocols sat heavy in her mind. They required immediate notification of her superiors, deployment of defensive screens, and activation of the station's diplomatic corps. But those protocols assumed contact with known forms of life. This was something else entirely. Clara thought about her grandmother's garden, where exotic crystal flowers grew in mathematical patterns. Each bloom followed the same sequence found throughout nature. The spiral of galaxies, the curve of waves, the branching of trees. Her grandmother had called it the universe's poetry. Making a decision that would either end her career or change history, Clara began composing a message. Instead of words or standard greeting protocols, she transmitted the mathematical sequence of natural growth patterns, the same ones found in her grandmother's garden. Simple at first: 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. She held her breath, her scales shifting to anxious patterns of blue and gold. For 3 excruciating minutes, there was no response. Then her instruments detected something extraordinary. The ship was changing its crystalline structure to physically represent the next numbers in the sequence. But they didn't stop there. As Clara watched in amazement, the sequence transformed. The numbers became harmonics, mathematical frequencies that her sensors interpreted as pure musical tones. The ship wasn't just responding. It was turning mathematics into music. The melody brought tears to her eyes. It contained the same growth patterns, but expressed through harmonies that resonated with something deep in her soul. The music spoke of growth, of transformation, of the delicate dance between technology and nature. Her antennae swayed unconsciously to its rhythm. Encouraged, Clara sent another sequence, this one representing the atomic structure of carbon, the building block of life as her people knew it. The response came faster this time. The ship transmitted the complete atomic structures of multiple elements, arranging them in a pattern that showed how they combined to form complex organic molecules. It was both a chemistry lesson and a symphony. Each atomic bond was represented by a harmonic relationship, creating music that was somehow both mathematically perfect and emotionally moving. Clara realized she was experiencing art and science as a single, unified concept. Then came something unexpected. The ship transmitted a new pattern, one she didn't recognize at first. As she analyzed it, her heart nearly stopped. It was the mathematical representation of Earth's transformation, the same pattern she discovered in the ancient probe data. But this version was complete, showing how each change had led to the next in an intricate dance of planetary evolution. With trembling fingers, Clara composed her next transmission. She sent the pattern of her own species' DNA, encoded in the same mathematical language they'd been sharing. The response was immediate, a gentle harmony that mirrored her pattern but subtly altered it to show its relationship to other forms of life, including human DNA. The ship was offering proof of their common origins, showing how all life was connected through the same fundamental patterns. But it went further, demonstrating how humanity had learned to work with these patterns instead of trying to control them. As Clara sat in her quiet corner of the station, communicating through mathematics and music with a species everyone thought long dead, she realized she wasn't just experiencing first contact. She was discovering a whole new way of seeing the universe, not as something to be conquered or controlled, but as a grand symphony waiting to be joined. The truth unfolded through a series of crystalline data packets, each one more extraordinary than the last. Clara's station had switched to emergency power, a regular maintenance cycle that gave her the perfect cover for extended communication with the human ship. In the dim blue lighting, the holographic displays cast shimmering patterns across her scales as she absorbed humanity's true story. We did not end, the first packet explained, through a combination of mathematical harmonics and carefully structured data. We transcended. The ship, which had introduced itself as the ecological research vessel Gaia's Dream, shared detailed records of Earth's transformation. Clara watched in fascination as three-dimensional models showed the planet's metamorphosis. What the Federation had interpreted as signs of destruction were actually the side effects of humanity's greatest project, the harmonious integration of technology and nature. Our greatest mistake, the data continued, was believing we had to choose between advancement and preservation. The true path forward was learning to merge them. The humans had discovered something revolutionary, a way to develop technology that worked with natural systems instead of against them. Their cities evolved into living organisms, buildings growing like crystal forests that generated energy while purifying the air. Transportation systems mimicked the flow patterns of rivers and wind currents, moving millions of people without disrupting ecological balance. Clara's antennae trembled as she studied the specifications of their living metal technology. The ship itself was a perfect example, a synthetic ecosystem that had evolved from these early experiments. Its hull wasn't just adaptive. It was alive, hosting gardens that recycled air, produced food, and maintained complex biological systems in space. "Look," the ship transmitted, sharing real-time interior views. Clara gasped. Inside what she had assumed were standard ship compartments were thriving forests, vertical farms, and crystalline gardens. Humans moved through these spaces with casual grace, tending to plants that seemed to respond to their presence. The distinction between crew and environment had blurred. They were all part of one integrated system. The atmospheric changes detected by the ancient Federation probe suddenly made sense. Humanity hadn't been destroying their atmosphere. They had been carefully restructuring it, introducing engineered organisms that transformed pollution into beneficial compounds. The radiation signatures came from vast networks of living solar collectors, inspired by how plants processed sunlight. We chose isolation, another data packet explained, not from fear or shame, but from responsibility. We needed to perfect our harmony with nature before sharing it with the galaxy. The ship showed her how they had transformed their entire solar system. Mercury had become a solar energy hub, its surface covered in living crystal arrays that harvested stellar energy. Venus was in the early stages of terraforming, with engineered organisms gradually transforming its hostile atmosphere. Mars had bloomed into a garden world, its red deserts transformed into vast grasslands and forests. Even the asteroid belt had been transformed, its rocks seeded with crystal gardens that formed a vast network of space habitats and research stations. Each piece of the system worked in concert with the others, creating a perfectly balanced ecosystem on a stellar scale. Clara's scales shifted through patterns of wonder as she realized the implications. Humanity hadn't just survived. They had achieved what every spacefaring race secretly dreamed of. They had learned to expand through space without consuming or destroying. Their technology didn't conquer nature. It elevated it to new forms of expression. We watched and waited. The final transmission explained, studying the Federation's development. We needed to be certain you were ready to understand. Your interest in our patterns, your recognition of the mathematical poetry, you showed us that at least one heart was ready to see. The ship shared one last detail that made Clara's heart skip. They had been quietly helping all along. Many of the Federation's independent discoveries in sustainable technology had been subtly guided by human observers, preparing the ground for eventual contact. As she processed this revelation, Clara noticed something remarkable about her station's emergency lighting. The bioluminescent panels were pulsing in patterns that matched the ship's harmonics. Humanity's influence had been there all along, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to recognize the symphony they had been composing across the stars. Over the next few station cycles, Clara's understanding of humanity deepened through a series of fascinating cultural exchanges with the crew of Gaia's Dream. Her quarters had become an unofficial diplomatic hub, filled with holographic projections of Earth's art, music, and daily life. Her superiors, still unaware of the contact, had attributed her increased power usage to detailed long-range sensor studies. The humans, she discovered, were walking contradictions that somehow made perfect sense. During one exchange, she watched in amazement as a human scientist used centuries-old pencil and paper to sketch out plans for a quantum harmonics garden. When she asked about the primitive tools, the scientist explained that connecting physically with ancient methods helped them stay grounded while working with advanced concepts. Balance, they told her, isn't about choosing one path. It's about finding harmony between opposites. This philosophy pervaded every aspect of their society. Their cities were marvels of bioengineering, yet contained carefully preserved historical districts where people still baked bread in old-fashioned ovens and played acoustic instruments in street performances. Their ships could bend space-time, yet they preferred to travel slowly enough to study and appreciate the cosmic phenomena they encountered. Clara's antennae tingled as she learned how they had transformed their greatest mistakes into their strongest motivations for positive change. The humans freely shared records of their past environmental destruction, economic inequalities, and social struggles. But instead of hiding these shameful chapters, they had turned them into teaching tools, constant reminders of why they chose their current path. Our flaws, a human historian explained through the quantum link, are as much a part of us as our achievements. Accepting them helped us grow beyond them. Their approach to technology particularly fascinated her. Federation species typically develop technology to overcome or control natural forces. Humans, by contrast, had learned to enhance and amplify nature's existing patterns. Their ship's living metal wasn't engineered to be strong. It was engineered to be adaptable, learning from every meteor impact and solar wind how to better flow with space itself. Even their medicine reflected this harmonious approach. Clara watched recordings of human doctors using advanced quantum scanners alongside traditional herbal remedies, explaining how both methods offered unique benefits. They had discovered that healing worked best when technology supported natural recovery processes rather than replacing them. Their artistic expressions left her scales shimmering with emotion. Humans had developed what they called biosymphonies, living musical performances where genetically modified plants responded to both traditional instruments and quantum harmonics, creating performances that engaged all senses. The art wasn't just something to observe. It was something to experience and participate in. We found that true advancement, a human artist explained, comes from integration, not replacement. Each new discovery adds to our palette rather than overriding what came before. This extended to their social structures as well. While the Federation prided itself on standardized protocols and unified governance, human society celebrated diversity. Their communities ranged from high-tech arcologies to traditional agricultural settlements, from space-based research stations to underwater cities. Each group contributed unique perspectives to their collective knowledge. Kalera's most surprising discovery was their approach to education. Federation schools focused on memorizing established facts and procedures. Human learning centers were more like living laboratories where students were encouraged to question everything, even their own teachers. They believed understanding came from exploration and personal experience rather than passive acceptance. Every individual, a human teacher shared, experiences the universe in a unique way. Those differences aren't problems to solve, they're strengths to cultivate. As she compiled her observations, Kalera realized that humanity's apparent disappearance had actually been a metamorphosis. They hadn't hidden from the galaxy out of fear or shame, but out of a deep commitment to getting things right. Every technology they developed, every system they implemented, was tested across generations to ensure it truly served life's best interests. Looking at her own reflection in the station's window, Kalera noticed her scales had begun to shimmer in patterns that mimicked the harmonics of human biosymphonies. She wasn't just studying another species. She was being transformed by the encounter, learning to see the universe through new eyes that recognized the beauty in contradiction and the strength in harmony. News of humanity's existence spread through the Federation like ripples in a quantum field, each wave bringing fresh wonder and revelation. Kalera, now officially appointed as the first xenocultural attaché to Earth, stood in the observation dome of her new office in the Terran Embassy, watching ships from 100 worlds arrive for the first official diplomatic summit. The embassy itself embodied everything she had learned about human innovation. Its crystalline spires weren't just built, they had been grown, emerging from carefully seeded foundations using the same living metal technology as their ships. The building responded to its occupants, adjusting light, temperature, and atmospheric composition to suit each species' needs. Even more remarkably, it produced no waste. Every system worked in perfect circular harmony, just like the natural ecosystems it was modeled after. "Your quarters are ready," Attaché Kalera announced the embassy's environmental intelligence, its voice harmonizing with the subtle music that seemed to flow through all human structures. Her new living space included a personal crystal garden, a gift from her grandmother who had finally seen her childhood fascination with human myths vindicated. Through the dome's transparent panels, she could see Earth shining like a jewel against the velvet black of space. The planet had become a pilgrimage site for scientists, artists, and philosophers from across known space. Its cities, seamlessly integrated with restored natural landscapes, demonstrated a way of life many had thought impossible, perfect balance between technological advancement and environmental harmony. The constellation once named for humanity's supposed extinction had been officially renamed the Phoenix Cradle in recognition of their remarkable rebirth. But humans, true to their nature, had suggested an addition to the name in their own ancient languages, Hope's Horizon. The dual name reflected their belief that every ending contained the seeds of a new beginning. Kalera's antennae detected a familiar harmonic resonance. Gaia's dream was returning from another diplomatic mission. The ship that had first revealed the truth to her now served as a living classroom, taking Federation scientists on educational journeys through the solar system. Each trip helped spread understanding of humanity's bioharmonious technology, but more importantly, their philosophy of balanced progress. Her data crystal contained the latest reports from Federation worlds already implementing human principles. Desert planets were blooming as engineered crystal forests drew moisture from the atmosphere. Polluted industrial worlds were being transformed by living filtration systems that turned contamination into resources. Even the most conservative species were discovering the benefits of working with nature rather than against it. The humans shared their knowledge freely, but with wise precautions. Each innovation was introduced gradually, accompanied by extensive education about the philosophical principles behind it. Technology without understanding, they taught, is like music without harmony. It may have power, but it lacks purpose. Calera's scales shifted to patterns of contentment as she reviewed messages from her former podmates. Many who had once mocked her interest in human myths now sought her guidance in understanding human culture. She helped them see that humanity's greatest achievement wasn't their technology. It was their willingness to learn from their mistakes and reinvent themselves without losing their essence. The summit would begin soon. Representatives from every Federation world would gather to discuss the next phase of cultural exchange. Humans had proposed a grand project, the creation of a galactic network of living gardens, connecting worlds through harmonious technology and shared understanding. Each planet would contribute its unique biological and cultural heritage, creating a symphony of diversity across the stars. As Calera prepared her opening remarks, she reflected on how far they had all come. The Federation had gained more than just new technology. They had discovered a new way of seeing the universe. Humanity had shown them that progress didn't require destruction, that strength could come from gentleness, and that the most powerful force in the cosmos was the tendency of life itself to seek harmony. The mythical humans hadn't destroyed themselves after all. They had simply stepped back, taken time to grow, and emerged when the galaxy was ready to bloom with them. As Calera watched the assembled ships paint patterns of light across Earth's night side, she realized that humanity's greatest gift to the universe wasn't their technology or their art. It was hope. Hope that any species could transform itself, that any mistake could be healed, and that the music of life would always find new ways to play across the stars.